What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Cricut Icon 4 and the Motorola Moto G Stylus 4G 2022. Now before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, and if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about each of them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Cricut Icon 4, we're getting a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 269, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. With the Moto G Stylus, we're getting a 6.8-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 396, and an aspect ratio of 20.5:9. So while on one hand, for what it is, I definitely don't think the Cricut Icon 4 has a bad display. In fact, if you're really not going to be on your phone a lot, maybe you're just watching the occasional video every now and then and browsing the web and doing stuff like that, the display we're getting here, especially considering this is really only a $100 phone, is actually pretty good. But that being said, of course, between the two, you will get a much better experience with the Moto G Stylus. At 6.8 inches versus 6.5, the Moto G Stylus is clearly larger, and with a 20.5:9 aspect ratio versus 20:9, we're also getting a slightly taller and more narrow form factor here. So if you're doing something like watching videos in landscape mode, for example, you're going to get a more immersive experience with the Moto G Stylus. And when you're doing stuff like browsing the web or using social media, you'll be able to fit a bit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. And then of course, there's also the image quality. With a 1080p resolution versus only 720p with the Cricut Icon 4, things are going to look a lot nicer and sharper with the Moto G Stylus. And with the 90Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother. So the Moto G Stylus is going to feel a bit more premium to use. So in general, again, with the Cricut Icon 4, for what it is, the display we're getting here is really not bad. And for more occasional light use, it will definitely get the job done. But if you're going to be on your phone a lot and you want a really nice looking display, the Moto G Stylus will definitely be a better choice. Now for storage here, the Cricut Icon 4 is getting 32GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion. And with the Moto G Stylus, we're getting 128GB with microSD card expansion as well. So clearly between the two, the Moto G Stylus has a huge advantage. With 128GB, this is going to be plenty of storage for pretty much anyone. Sure, if you're really a power user and you have a ton of apps and games and stuff like that, in that kind of situation, you might want even more storage than this. But honestly, if you're considering these two phones, that is pretty unlikely. So in this case, if you are concerned about storage in pretty much any way, I would definitely go with the Moto G Stylus. Because with the Cricut Icon 4, 32GB is honestly really not a lot of storage. In this day and age, with stuff like apps, the system, and just files in general getting larger and larger, even if you're really not doing a whole lot with your phone, 32GB is still going to fill up pretty quickly. So really, unless you're doing the absolute bare minimum and you only have a couple apps here and there, you're probably going to want more storage than this. So in general, again, if you are concerned about storage, then the Moto G Stylus is definitely going to be a much better choice. Now for security features, both phones do have face unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners as well. With the Cricut Icon 4, it's right here in the back, and with the Moto G Stylus, it's here on the power key. But starting with the Cricut Icon 4, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Moto G Stylus. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, they worked real well. No issues at all. And again, both phones do have face unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, there is definitely a huge difference. On one hand, with the Cricut Icon 4, we're really not getting a whole lot. We got a 5-megapixel front-facing camera with a water drop notch design. Then on the back, we got a single 13-megapixel rear camera. On the other hand, with the Moto G Stylus, we got a nice looking hole punch design for the front-facing camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50-megapixel main camera, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide camera that also doubles as a macro camera, and a 2-megapixel depth sensing camera. So as far as features go, while the Cricut Icon 4 has pretty much nothing, the Moto G Stylus has pretty much everything, so they're basically complete opposites. So honestly, even for just that alone, I would definitely go with the Moto G Stylus if you care about the camera in pretty much any way. Because aside from the features, the photo quality we're getting here with the Moto G Stylus is actually pretty good for what it is. Sure, it's still definitely not going to be the best camera in the world, but if you're taking photos for, say, social media or something, then I feel like with the Moto G Stylus, the camera we're getting here is pretty much all you're ever going to need for that. On the other hand, with the Cricut Icon 4, if you're just taking regular photos, you don't care about the ultra-wide camera, macro cameras, or even portrait mode for that matter, you can get some decently acceptable photos here. So maybe if you're just taking a couple photos every now and then, and you really don't care about the camera that much, or maybe you're using Snapchat where the quality doesn't really even matter, in that kind of situation, the Cricut Icon 4 will at least get the job done. But again, if you're taking any decent amount of photos, then keep in mind, you will get a much better experience with the Moto G Stylus. As far as RAM and processor go, with the Cricut Icon 4, we're getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek MediaTek Helio A22 processor. With the Moto G Stylus, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G88. Now, as far as the overall performance goes, keep in mind, neither of these phones are really particularly fast. On one hand, with the Cricket Icon 4, it's a little bit more obvious. This is really just a $100 phone, so you can't really expect great performance from a phone like this. And with the Moto G Stylus, while the performance we're getting here really isn't that bad, it's actually noticeably slower than its predecessor. And honestly, for a phone in this price range, at least considering the full price of this phone, if you're really that concerned about performance, then honestly, I feel like you can do better than either of these phones. That being said though, just between the two, the Moto G Stylus is definitely quite a bit faster, so if you're going to be on your phone a little bit more, then you will get a much better experience here. And honestly, for more basic activities, like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, this phone actually does handle that kind of thing pretty well. On the other hand, with the Cricket Icon 4, keep in mind, even for what it is, this phone is definitely on the slower side. So if you're going to be on your phone all day or anything like that, then I would definitely go with the Moto G Stylus. But for more basic activities, for again, pretty much the bare minimum, the Cricket Icon 4 will still at least get the job done. Now, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both phones, and here are the scores I got. So again, as you can see here, the Moto G Stylus is significantly faster than the Cricket Icon 4. But that being said, again, keep in mind, if you really are more of a heavy user, and you're going to be on your phone constantly, especially doing stuff like mobile gaming, for example, that needs a little bit more processing power to run well. Although the Moto G Stylus is still a lot faster than the Cricket Icon 4, in and of itself, it's still really not that fast. So if you are more of a power user, then again, you can do better. But of course, between the two, there's really no question. The Moto G Stylus is a lot faster, so unless you're really doing the bare minimum, performance-wise, you will get a much better experience with this phone. For the batteries, with the Cricket Icon 4, we're getting a 4000 mAh battery that supports 10W fast charging, and with the Moto G Stylus, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 10W fast charging as well. So charging speeds are basically going to be the same, but as far as the battery size goes, obviously, the Moto G Stylus does have much better battery life, since after all, a 5000 mAh battery is significantly larger than a 4000 mAh battery. That being said though, the battery life you get with the Cricket Icon 4 is still really not that bad, so if you just need something decent that's going to last all day, either phone will get the job done. But if battery life is really a priority for you, then of course, the Moto G Stylus is going to be a better choice. Now, as far as other features go, something interesting I do want to point out is that with the Cricket Icon 4, we are actually getting NFC, making it actually the cheapest phone I've ever seen that has this feature. But on the other hand, for whatever reason, the Moto G Stylus doesn't have NFC. Keep in mind, in case you're wondering, the Moto G Stylus 5G actually does have NFC, but again, with this phone, the 4G version, for some reason, Motorola did decide to leave that feature out. So if you do like to make contactless mobile payments, the Cricket Icon 4 will actually have an advantage here. On the other hand, this kind of goes without saying, but as the name of the phone suggests, the Moto G Stylus of course does have a stylus, and while it's not really the best stylus in the world, especially compared to a much higher end device, if you want to use it for more basic things like taking handwritten notes, maybe playing a game or two, or just using the phone in general, it is still a nice feature to have. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now, on one hand, as you probably could have guessed going into this video, aside from not having NFC, the Moto G Stylus is a better phone in pretty much every way. That being said though, despite being the better phone of the two, it might actually not make the most sense for everyone. On one hand, obviously, we are comparing a $100 phone to a $300 phone, so of course with the Moto G Stylus, it's probably not surprising that we are getting a much better display here, significantly better performance, a larger battery, and a much better camera. But that being said, if you're really not using your phone for a whole lot, maybe you just need something basic for the bare minimum, and you don't really care about performance, camera features, photo quality, you don't need a ton of storage, or crazy long battery life or anything like that. In that kind of situation, I honestly don't see a reason to pay more for something like the Moto G Stylus, when you could get the Cricket Icon 4 that's gonna fill your needs for a lot less. That being said though, I do want to point out that with the Moto G Stylus, as of the recording in this video, and I want to say most of the time for that matter, Cricket is offering some really good deals with this phone that make it actually almost as affordable as the Cricket Icon 4. So while again at full price, the Moto G Stylus is pretty much 3 times the price of the Cricket Icon 4. In reality, it's pretty unlikely that you're actually going to be paying that much for this phone, so if you can find these phones for around the same price, then yeah, unless you really want NFC, definitely go with the Moto G Stylus. But again, if you can get the Cricket Icon 4 for significantly less, and you really just need something for the basics, then honestly, for the money, while the Moto G Stylus again is obviously the better device here, in that kind of situation where you're really not doing a whole lot with your phone, the Cricket Icon 4 will most likely get the job done just fine. But this concludes my comparison between the Cricket Icon 4 and the Motorola Moto G Stylus 4G 2022. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about each of them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.